Carl Azus with your down-the-middle explanation of world events. This is CNN10. We're happy to see you just one day away from Friday. Our first story is on what was like a game of chicken between two warships in the South China Sea. Here's what happened. The USS Decatur, an American destroyer, was conducting a freedom of navigation operation on Sunday. It was sailing near reefs in the Spratly Islands, which are located in the South China Sea, when a Chinese destroyer approached the American ship. The U.S. Navy says the Chinese warship gave warnings for the American vessel to leave the area and conducted a series of increasingly aggressive maneuvers, at one point forcing the USS Decatur to make a radical move to avoid a possible collision. The Navy says at one point the two vessels were within 45 yards of each other. You can see how close that is by these photos released by a maritime blog site. A former U.S. Navy captain says the USS Decatur would have had the right-of-way under international law, but that the Chinese ship broke the rules of the road. All of this centers on disputed reefs in the South China Sea. China has built islands there, which it claims as its territory. But the U.S. and several other countries don't recognize these man-made islands as Chinese territory. So when the U.S. Navy sails nearby on freedom of navigation operations, it says it's enforcing the right of international ships to pass freely through international waters, while China says it's defending and safeguarding Chinese territorial waters. This dispute has been building just as the islands have been built up in the South China Sea.
The South China Sea is one of the busiest and most militarized shipping routes in the world. Experts also believe a wealth of oil and gas is lying below the area's surface. China claims almost all of this body of water for itself, ignoring competing claims from countries like the Philippines and Vietnam. To complicate things further, Brunei, Malaysia, and the island of Taiwan also have territorial claims. To legitimize its claims, China has built up artificial islands in the Spratly chain. Take Fiery Cross Reef, for example. In 2015, CNN flew with the US Navy over Fiery Cross Reef, which was already a man-made island. And this is what it looks like today. Airstrips, radar towers, 4- and 5-story concrete buildings. Lieutenant Lauren Callan is the commander of the US Navy who flies over the South China Sea.
It was very surprising to see just essentially airports out in the middle of the ocean.
Much of China's territorial claims are based on something called the 9-dash line, which is used by Beijing to mark out what it sees as Chinese territory. The 9-dash line takes in nearly all of the South China Sea, an area the size of Mexico. Historically, the 9-dash line has caused a lot of tension, so much so that when the Philippines took China to the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague back in 2016, the court rejected most of Beijing's claims over the South China Sea, finding them illegal. But there's no real way to enforce the court's ruling, so China has refused to abide by it, instead continuing to build up artificial islands to reinforce its claims of sovereignty.
They've militarized these new artificial islands, so they've built airstrips, they've put missile systems on there, they've put radar jamming stations, they've put radar installations, and so all of that taken in totality over the last several years has really caused tensions to rise.
This is where the U.S. comes into the dispute. For the past year, it has stepped up its naval operations in the South China Sea, sailing within miles of China's artificial islands, showing its commitment to maintaining freedom of navigation. It also monitors developments from above, regularly flying over the South China Sea in Navy reconnaissance planes. This has created tense standoffs between the US and China, like this warning the crew received while CNN was flying with them.
U.S. military aircraft, Papa 8 Alpha. This is Chinese Yunsh Reef. China has sovereignty of the natural islands, including Yunsh Reef and its adjacent waters. Leave immediately and keep far off so as to avoid any misunderstanding.
I'm a sovereign and being United States naval aircraft conducting lawful military activities beyond the national airspace of any coastal state. In exercising these rights as guaranteed by international law, I am operating with due regard for the rights and duties of all states.
Time may be running out to effectively challenge China's claims in the South China Sea, though. Admiral Philip Davidson, the new head of the U.S. Pacific Command, told senators during a confirmation hearing in April that China is now capable of controlling the South China Sea in all scenarios short of war with the United States.
10-second trivia. On average, which of these celestial objects is about 140 million miles away from Earth? Is it the Moon, the Sun, Mars, or Pluto? Though the exact distance varies because it has its own orbit, Mars is an average of 140 million miles away. So getting there, if and when a manned Mars mission gets off the ground, could take 9 months. And that could mean some major problems as far as an astronaut's health is concerned. Previously, we've discussed the eye and back problems that astronauts on longer missions have experienced. Since the late 1980s, more than half the Americans who've spent time in space have complained of back pain. Now, researchers at Georgetown University Medical Center have published a new study paid for by NASA. It found that deep space missions could permanently harm astronauts' intestines, causing stomach and colon cancer. Scientists got their results by exposing mice to heavy ion radiation, which is believed to be like the galactic cosmic radiation that someone would be exposed to in deep space. At low radiation doses, the long exposure times caused a lot of intestinal problems for the mice. It also prevented them from absorbing nutrients from their food. Researchers say it's hard to prevent radiation exposure like this in deep space, and that there's no medicine to reverse the permanent organ damage that this radiation causes. They believe that other organs besides the intestines would be affected too. Relatively short space trips, like those to the moon, might not lead to this kind of damage, according to researchers. Our next story today, no country on Earth has an average life expectancy of 100. We told you earlier this week that Monaco, which you see right here, has the longest life expectancy. That's 89.5 years. In the other nations in the top 10 for that, people can expect to live on average between 82 and 85 years. But if you are hoping to become a centenarian, we have some new tips for you in our ongoing Living to 100 series. CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta is getting back to basics today. Basic safety.
I don't think a lot of people realize this, but if you're under the age of 45 in this country, #1 cause of death is from unintentional injuries. All the other things, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, cancer, all those things are typically in people who are older, but it's trauma usually from unintentional injuries that is most likely to kill somebody who is younger. So think about that every time you get behind the wheel. 32,000 people die every year, 2 million are injured every year in car accidents. The biggest problem I think now, especially for this generation, is looking at the phone, texting and driving. And there's been plenty of evidence to show how much you can divert your attention even by looking at the phone for a split second from the road, and how far your car can actually travel during that time. That's another prescription for an accident. I love to bike. I think you can do it on the open road and you can do it safely, but you got to keep a few things in mind. You always want to obviously ride with traffic. You want to obey traffic laws just like the vehicles do. And I'm not saying this just because I'm a neurosurgeon, but never forget to wear your helmet. And keep biking, because it's good for exercise, it's good for your body, and it'll help you live to 100.
High-end athletic shoes can set you back anywhere from $80 to $160. The most expensive men's dress shoes I can find were $1,900. These are priced even higher. Now, before I tell you how much they cost, here's a few things to keep in mind. They're made of leather, silk, gold, and diamonds. That includes 2 flawless stones of 15 carats each. They're on sale in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. They're custom made, and they're believed to be the most expensive shoes on the planet. Now for the price, $17 million. That's more than some islands, so I guess it comes down to what you want to set foot on. You'd have to be more than well-heeled to afford those high heels. You'd have to let go of a fortune, and they could be a shoo-in for foot pain, so you may win the shoes but still have the agony of defeat. It'd be interesting to see which buyer puts her best foot forward and steps out to toe the line on such overarchingly expensive shoes. She'll only need one since they already cost an arm and a leg. I'm Carl Azus, and that's CNN.